Good morning. Oh, ladies, we can do better than that. We're going to start off the day with a lot of energy. Good morning. All right, before we begin today, I would like to invite one of our summit leaders to come up here, and as we take a moment to honor the men and women who are serving our country at the moment by doing a Pledge of Allegiance. So, you're just going to have to use loud voice.
Please stand. Face the flag. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Juliana. Good morning, everyone. Oh, come on, we already established this. Let's try that again. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first Young Women's Leadership Summit here at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. We are so excited to have you here today. So before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping items. You may notice that there are women around your tables that are wearing t-shirts that say our wonderful hashtag Girls Who Lead. These are our summit leaders. They are here to support us throughout the day. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to them. If you need directions, they are people who can guide you through your experience. If you want to make new friends, they're wonderful people. Okay? I want to start off today just by thanking some of the people that we have in the room. First and foremost, I want to thank our Chief Administrative Officer, Joanne Drake, being here, supporting us here today. It's wonderful to have you. Additionally, I want to thank our distinguished speakers who have flown in from all over the United States to be here and share their stories with you today. They're over here. I would also like to give a huge personal thank you to Dr. Karen Lockwood. Through her generous donation and support, this event is able to take place today. So please, round of applause. I want to send out a few personal thank yous of everyone who has made today possible. First and foremost, I want to thank our leader here under the helm of education, who is our Chief Learning Officer, Tony Penne. Through his leadership, we are able to put on great events here like this today. And it really does take a village to put these things on. And so a personal thank you to my team, who has been working tirelessly to put this on for you for months, who had very late nights this week, and who got here very early this morning to ensure that everything is going to move forward. And last but not least, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to set aside a Saturday and join us to talk about women's leadership and the importance that it is today. So, as we begin, I want to really start talking about women and leadership. And I'm an avid researcher, so I began by going to my good friend, Google. No, I didn't. So, I went to Google. I would have a lovely image of Google there, but I think you all know what Google looks like. And I went to Google and I typed in Women's Leadership Conference, just trying to see if there are things like this happening. And what I found was that there was 58.6 million responses that showed up. So there is a national, global, regional, local conversation happening around women and leadership. This year, the White House held the United States Women's Summit with the intention to celebrate what we as women have accomplished and look forward to taking informed action, making a powerful difference in our collective future. In addition to that, there's the TED Conference. How many of you are familiar with TED Talks? If you're not, Google it. Enjoy it. So in 2000, nearly 4 years ago, the popular TED Conference decided to bring forth a new initiative, and it was called TED Women. It was a global initiative of bringing men and women together who wanted to look at where change begins. And this past year's summit was just last month, and in the 2016 summit, we had over 40 speakers who came together to share their insights about the time is now. And through that program, we had 280 TEDx events in 74 countries across the globe. We had women who were tuning into the live stream, as well as bringing their own thoughts and presentations at the table. It truly was a global initiative, from San Francisco to Seoul, everyone was talking about women and leadership. Conferences are not the only space where these conversations are happening. How many of you have ever heard of Sheryl Sandberg? A few? I'm going to enlighten you today. Ladies, she is a force. Again, I encourage you to Google her. She is the COO of Facebook, and in 2010, she was approached to do a TED Talk, and she really felt compelled to do it on women's leadership. And what she was told was, you cannot be a professional executive leader and talk about women. Do you know what she did? She's a force. She did it anyway, okay? She went on stage, she talked about women in leadership, and the response was epic. It was so epic, the stories that she was receiving from people who were so touched by her TED Talk, it's one of the most highly viewed TED Talks in existence today. She ended up writing a book about it, and it was called Lean In. And in that book, she shared stories, she used research to illuminate gender discrepancies, and really used it as a platform to advise women on how to achieve their goals. What she ended up doing, which was unintentional, was creating a movement. If you go to any social media outlet and type in #LeanIn, you will find all the stories and inspirations that come from Sheryl Sandberg. She created a call to action to have an open dialogue and bring forth change towards a more equal world. Now I have wonderful slides. There we go. Since 2004, Forbes magazine has been publishing their list of 100 powerful women. What just so happens that the very first woman on that list was the woman who inspired today's event, Chief Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. Today, we find women in the public sector, private and public sector being recognized. The 2016 notables are public servants such as Janet Yellen and Hillary Clinton, First Lady Michelle Obama, the notorious RBG herself, Chief Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, tech moguls like Sheryl Sandberg, and the first female to lead the automobile industry, Mary Barra. These women have laid down the pavers of the road towards success in women's leadership. And yet, even though there's a thriving dialogue of women and leadership, these women are actually framed as the exception rather than the example. In a study conducted by Pew Research addressing women in leadership in 2015, we see some really startling data. First, in the past 50 years, women represented in Congress has only grown from a total of 4 women, seen in 1965, to now currently 39 women. It's roughly about 20% of our Congress is women, when the population of the United States reflects that women take 51%. In the past 20 years, leadership at the CEO level for Fortune 500 companies has increased from 0 in 1995 to only 5.2%. So we're seeing women enter into leadership roles, but not at a drastic rate. In 2013, when asked to reflect on changes since her writing of Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg stated that there's a difference between dialogue and action, and that's what we're currently not seeing, action. She said, here's what we know. Stereotypes are holding women back from leadership all around the world. All around the world, no matter your culture, there is one constant. We think that men should be strong, assertive, aggressive, and have a voice. We think women should speak when spoken to and help others. Women are judged through a different lens. Men, a man is a boss, and a woman, she's bossy. How many of you are feeling overwhelmed by that bleak data? It's a safe space we can share, okay? I know I am. And in going through that, I started having some questions. And one of the questions that I want to pose to you today is, what if we shifted our perspective? Instead of looking at that data and saying, we've only grown so much, what if we embraced acknowledgement of the situation and look at it with optimism moving forward? President Reagan was known as an eternal optimist. He focused on what people brought to the table, not what they lacked. And that is the lens that I have decided to view the recent events of our 2016 election. Here are my takeaways. I wanted to be able to take a look at the election and celebrate things, because I think that there are a lot of people, specifically women, who feel like there's nothing to celebrate. So here's what I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to celebrate that since 1980, The percentage of eligible women voters that turned out to vote has been more every single election than the registered men that turned out to vote. So we have women participating in a democracy as citizens, using their ballots as their voice. And I think that that's pretty wonderful to celebrate. In addition, come this January, there will be a record number of women serving in Congress who are of color, 38. We see our first Latina senator, Catherine Cortez Masto. We have, yes, woo. We have Tammy Duckworth, who will move from the House of Representatives to the Senate, becoming the first Thai American in the chamber. And representing our own state, we have the first Indian American to serve in the US Senate and the second woman who is African American with Kamala Harris. Pretty amazing. And last, I want to address the elephant in the room, and not a Republican. Okay? I'm going to address Hillary Clinton. And regardless of what you may feel at this moment with her campaign, I want to look at it through optimism. This is the first time in American history that we have had a woman top the ticket of a major presidential party. And in addition to that, she also received the majority of the popular vote by 1 million votes. So even though we do not have a woman in the White House today, glass ceilings were shattered this election. And despite what some people say, that glass ceiling, there's only one piece left, and it's small. And based on the remarks from our chief admin officer, Joanne Drake, when we were talking earlier this week, she shared with me, yeah, there is one piece left, and it resides over 16 Pennsylvania Avenue over the White House. But that's it. And that's a really great thing for us to celebrate and move forward in looking at what it's going to look like for women's leadership coming. So let's just celebrate that for a moment. Many women, our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, have fought to bring us where we are today. And it is up to us to continue paving and widening the road for future generations. This is what today is all about. We're going to have a dialogue, and then we're going to take action. And when sharing tips on how to open a dialogue about women and leadership, Sheryl Sandberg offers 2 suggestions. 1, be honest. 2, tell your story. So that's what I'm going to do with you today. I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to tell you my leadership story. And I'm going to shift from talking behind this podium because I don't want to talk at you about women's leadership. I want to talk with you. I want us to be girlfriends having coffee, having a chat. I apologize, I didn't bring the coffee. So girlfriends chatting over water, okay? And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to be very vulnerable and honest, and I'm going to share with you a weakness that I have, and that is public speaking. I am terrified of public speaking. And in thinking about that, I couldn't even begin to describe how I was going to tell you guys what the pit of anxiety feels like in my stomach. So instead, I decided, again, to be optimistic, and I'm going to do as Sheryl does, and I'm going to lean in, okay? So my leadership journey started with my family. I have a pretty big family, predominantly women, and what's interesting is that when growing up, when people were talking about the Knox family, they were really mostly talking about the Knox women. We were a force, and still are a force. My sisters, there are 4 of us in total. We all have different personalities, passions, interests, but the one thing that we share is that we had a voice, and we were never told in our household that our voice needed to be dimmed or muted. In addition to that, this is my sister, Diana. And I may get emotional, and I may cry, but that's okay, because this is a space for that. Diana is 12 years my senior, and since I was a child, she has been my mentor. She has provided a safe haven for me to come when I needed just somebody to listen. She's provided advice for me when I didn't know where to go. And she knows how to take care of me in ways nobody else does. There are times I've gone to visit her where in the morning I wake up and there's a cookie next to my bed. And then there's massages booked in the afternoon. She is my mentor, always will be, always has been. And in thinking about Diana, one of the things I admire about her is her leadership style. She brings poise, confidence, and compassion to everything that she does. And she has held a leadership role in every single thing she has ever done. I told you she was a force, okay? And she is who I aspire to be when I will eventually decide to be a grown-up, okay? My next mentor is somebody I have never met. This is Eliza Lucas Pinckney. And when I went to graduate school, I studied women's history. I spent a lot of years dedicating my life to researching and then telling the stories of women who didn't have a voice at the time. And I fell in love with Eliza Lucas Pinckney. She was born in the West Indies in 1722, and then she moved to South Carolina with her father and ran his plantation for him. She was the first woman to successfully cultivate indigo to be used as a dye in the fabric market. So if any of you are wearing jeans today, you have this lady to thank. She is the one that brought that beautiful blue hue color to you. In addition, Eliza also had the confidence at the age of 16 to not once, not twice, but 3 times tell her father, thank you, but no thank you, to the marriage proposals that he would bring home to her. She told him, I will be the decider of my own fate. And she was, and she married a wonderful man. When she became a mother, she was a progressive mother. She raised 2 young boys who grew up, who were key players in the American Revolution and ended up being signers of the Constitution. Her daughter, strong, independent woman, ran 3 plantations of her own. George Washington was a pallbearer at her funeral. She also has given us the largest collection of written word by a female to date in the colonial era. And so as I spent years kind of going through her letters and going through her diaries, we became friends. And in one of those letters in 1762, she wrote this to a friend. I love a garden and a book, and they are my amusement, except I include one of my greatest businesses of my life. That is my attention to my dear little girl. Told you I would get emotional. So this brings me to the next step in my leadership journey. I'm a mom. This is my daughter. Whew. This is the picture that I gave to her preschool when they asked me to give a picture that represents her true self. You can tell that she's got that Knox woman blood in her. She's a little fearless. This picture was taken on the day that she decided to dress herself for the first time, all by herself. She picked out everything, she came downstairs, and then she posed for this picture because she wanted to document it. She has a strong conviction. And so she chose boys' underwear that have cars on them because she told me, Mommy, boys just have better characters on their underwear. She chose a t-shirt that said, anyone can be anything, a pink cowboy hat, and then purple sparkle shoes. No pants, and she told me that was on purpose. And in thinking about that she's 3 years old and she has such a strong sense of self and an independent spirit, I think about how I will be a leader to her as a mother and as a woman. How do I cultivate that? How do I make it feel that she never has to be muted as she wakes up? She is why I do the work that I do here. Because I want her to grow up in a space where she can be who she wants to be and she can achieve what she wants to achieve and not feel like she's being different. So that brings me to my work here at the foundation. And as I was preparing my remarks, I actually couldn't bring to words what I was going to talk about in regards to the work that I do here. It's amazing. I get to work not only with amazing young women and men and help cultivate the next generation of citizen leaders, but I also get to work with an amazing team. This team is called the Female Trifecta. It's the 3 of us, because when we come together and we bring our individual strengths and talents, we can achieve greatness. And it is my honor to serve as a mentor to these 2 young women that are here today. So if you have the opportunity to see Becky or Whitney, give them a high five or a hug, tell them they're awesome, and say it's from me, okay? Now, let's get to you. Today is really about you. And the work that I do here is really thinking about what you are going to usher in the future, because that's really what it's all about. And I'm excited to see what passions you bring to the table, what personalities come out, and what power comes into this room. Now, some of you may be thinking, I don't have any power. I don't know what that feels like. That's okay. We're going to do an exercise. I don't know if many of you know about power posing, but there's a Harvard Business School social psychologist. Her name is Amy Cuddy. She's also done a TED Talk, and she's written a book about power posing. She believes that a person, by assuming 2 simple 1-minute poses, embody power and instantly become more powerful. And she coins it power posing, and it's kind of taking the world over by storm. Celebrities are doing it and tweeting about it. This is Anna Kendrick. One day ago, she was power posing before an event in Chicago. She was really excited about it. So what I would like us to do is to really harness that. The energy that we bring into this room is going to be really important for what we can accomplish here today. And so I'd love for everybody to just think privately to yourself a few minutes. What pose could you do that is going to bring your best and most empowered self to the table today? Think about it. And in a couple seconds, we're going to do it. Ensemble, together. Take a couple deep breaths. Think about what it looks like. You can go classic Wonder Woman. You can go silly kooky. You can strut a Beyonce pose. Whatever your heart desires. But what I'd love everybody to do is to please stand up. And on the count of 3, we are going to strike our power pose. And ladies, I want this power pose to be intentional. I want this power pose to fill the entire room with the girl power I know you guys are all bringing to the table. So that way we can set the tone for what we're going to accomplish here today. Are you ready? Oh, ladies, come on, we talked about this. Are you ready? Okay. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Again, technology has failed me. There was supposed to be a soundbite of Beyonce's Who Run the World Girls play. This is why I don't use technology in presentations. It always fails me. Thank you for sharing that with us. I felt that energy today. And I want to thank the gentlemen in the room that participated and brought all their girl power as well to the table. Because I think when we talk about women's leadership, it's not just about women, okay? We need to think about the men who are here to support us as well. So, like my sister Diana, like Eliza Lucas Pinckney, like my daughter, like my team, you are all a force, and I can't wait to witness the great changes that you guys bring about. You're the future, and I want to leave you with a quote from President Reagan. He's speaking directly to you. You can play a special part in this future. You'll be its author. Take full advantage of the wonderful world or wonderful life that lies in store for you. Thank you for letting me share my story. At this time, I would like to welcome up a man in our life that 100% supports women's leadership. He was excited about putting on this event. It was the first thing he tasked me with when I got hired here a year ago. He thought he was going to get away with not speaking today, and I said, no, 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 good sir. You're coming on stage. So please welcome Tony Penny.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? All right, I'm very obviously not a woman, which is one of the reasons why I felt very strange speaking at today's event. But my name's Tony Penny, and I'm the Chief Learning Officer here at the Foundation. And one of the reasons why I'm excited to speak here is because I am a grandson to my grandmother, a son to my mother, a father to my daughters, and I work with some amazing women and have been mentored by some amazing women here. And so I am fully behind women's leadership because women have inspired me throughout my life. Our mission here in the education department is best summed up in the words of President Reagan. He said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We don't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children what it was once like in the United States." So in a sense, that's our job here at the Foundation. We are charged with keeping the light of freedom burning. We are charged with helping cultivate the next generation of citizen leaders, the sorts of thoughtful, engaged young leaders we know our country needs. People like you, women like you. 5 years ago, when I was first appointed the Director of Education here at the Foundation, my first big assignment was to host a discussion with Justice Sandra Day O'Connor on this very stage in front of about 700 people. And if I'm being honest, I was scared out of my mind. Not because I'm nervous being on stage. I do get a little nervous being on stage. And I didn't sleep much that night. And not because at that time it was the biggest moment of my career. And it was. And I really wanted to be sure it went well. But I was scared because we only had an hour to sit down with somebody who had changed history. And I was worried that an hour wasn't enough time to convey just how important she was to our country, to young women, to people who aspire to legal careers. And I was worried we wouldn't have enough time to figure out exactly what she meant to the future in that hour. So 2016 actually marks the 35th anniversary of Sandra Day O'Connor's appointment to the Supreme Court. And with 3 women sitting on the Supreme Court now, perhaps we've grown accustomed to seeing women at the highest level of the law. But prior to Sandra Day O'Connor's confirmation in 1981, the Supreme Court had been in existence for 192 years, and 101 men had served on the court. To give you a sense of how difficult it was for a woman interested in a legal career to reach the Supreme Court even 192 years after the formation of our country and 60 years after the 19th Amendment, Justice O'Connor, when she was here on stage, mentioned that before her appointment to the Supreme Court, President Reagan's Attorney General had made a list of the potential women who could sit on the Supreme Court because President Reagan had promised to nominate a woman to the Supreme Court. And that list was very, very short. Does anyone know why? There weren't a lot of federal judges who were women. There weren't a lot to choose from. In fact, from the time the first federal judge, which is the level right below the Supreme Court, was appointed, was Franklin Roosevelt in 1934. Between 1934 and 1977, a total of only 8 women had been named to a federal court. So there wasn't a whole lot of women to choose from. And why was that? Sandra Day O'Connor graduated from Stanford Law School in 1956, right in the middle of that time period, 60 years ago. How different was the world then? How difficult was it for a young female lawyer? What odds did she face? Well, I'm going to let her tell you. So I'm going to play a clip from her time here. And hopefully we got the sound up and working.
And I will tell you that it was hard in those days. I got out of law school in 1952, and there were notices on the placement bulletin board at Stanford Law School, and they were from every major law firm in California. Stanford Law graduates, call us. We want to talk to you about a job. Call us. There were at least 40 of those on the bulletin board, and I called 40 phone numbers of law firms to ask for an interview. Not a single one would even give me an interview. I was female. They wouldn't even talk to me. And they had these notices on the bulletin board. I had a friend at Stanford from undergraduate days whose father was a partner in a big California law firm. And I went to her and I said, talk to your father and see if he would get me an interview in the law firm he was with. And she did, and he got me an interview. And I made the trip to Los Angeles, down here, talked to the distinguished partner, oh, Miss Day, you have a fine resume here, Miss Day. But Miss Day, this firm has never hired a woman lawyer. I don't see the day when we will. And I looked shocked. And he said, well, our clients wouldn't stand for it. And that was where I was. And I needed a job because I'd gotten engaged to John O'Connor. He was a year behind me, and we both liked to eat, and that meant one of us was going to have to work, and that was me. So I heard that the district attorney, county attorney in San Mateo County, California, had once had a woman lawyer on his staff. And so I wrote him a letter and made an appointment to see him. And he was a very nice man. He was Italian-American, and they still elect county attorneys in California. It's an elected office. Anyway, he'd been there for a while, and he couldn't have been nicer. And he said, oh, you have a fine resume, Miss Day. I did have a woman lawyer in my office at one time, and she did a good job. I'd be happy to have another one, and you have a good record here. I'd be happy to have you. But I get my money from the County Board of Supervisors, and I'm not funded to hire another deputy. What can I do? And so I went back to the Lazy Bee Ranch because I was getting ready for our wedding out there, and I wrote him a long letter that's now in the museum, and I told him the things that I thought I could do well in the office if he hired me. And I said, I know you don't have any money, but I'll work for you for nothing. You don't have to pay me a dime until such time as you have a little money and you can pay something. That's all right with me. And he said, you know, I don't have an office to put anybody else. And I said, I know you don't have a vacant office, but I met your secretary. She's very nice, and I'd be happy to put my desk in the secretary's office if she doesn't object. That was my first job as a lawyer. No pay, and I put my desk in with the secretary. But you know what? I loved my job. I got such interesting legal questions to try to answer. I just loved every minute of my job. So it just, in those days, a woman had to maybe make some special efforts to get some kind of work, but I'm glad I did, and it all worked out.
So it's amazing she says special efforts, because Sandra Day O'Connor graduated near the top of her class from Stanford Law School, one of the brightest young legal minds in the entire country, and she basically had to beg to work for free. Right? Almost unimaginable today. A lot of people would have given up before making it through those 40 firms that she called, or the interview, or before agreeing to cozy up with the secretary and share an office, but not Justice O'Connor. And that's one of the reasons why President Reagan liked her so much, because she was tough. She grew up on a ranch near the Arizona-New Mexico border, 35 miles from the nearest town. They would only go into town once a week. And she said, I grew up on a ranch and was used to doing things. It didn't matter on the ranch if I was a girl or a boy. There was work to be done, and someone had to do it. Well, 192 years into our country's history, there was work to be done, and someone had to do it. It was time for a woman to take her rightful place on the highest court in the land. But she understood full well that being first doesn't mean being easy. She said, it's exciting to be the first to do something, but I didn't want to be the last. And if I took that job and did a lousy job, it might be a very long time before we had another woman on the court. Well, she took that job, and she did it well. And now we've become accustomed not just to seeing a woman on the court, but to seeing women on the court. And President Reagan often talked about his appointment of Justice O'Connor as one of the proudest moments of his time in office. And a big part of today is celebrating what Justice O'Connor represents and what she did for women in our country. But she wasn't the only tough woman in President Reagan's life. And not the only important woman in President Reagan's life. As part of the framing of the work for today, I want to talk briefly about a couple of other important women who played a role in his life. And I'm going to ask you to do some thinking and writing as well. Everybody has their notebook and a pen. All right. So I'm going to talk about two different types of women in President Reagan's life, and I want you to think about this for you too. So the first person I want you to think about is I want you to think about your foundation. I want you to think about the best parts of yourself, your character, your integrity, where you get your values from, your work ethic. And I want you to think about and write down the name of a woman or women, could be more than one. Where does that come from for you? Where does your foundation come from? For President Reagan, it came from his mother. There's a picture of President Reagan and his mom, Nell Reagan. And he wrote about her, and I'll read this while you're writing down. He wrote about her in his autobiography. My mother, a small woman with auburn hair and a sense of optimism that ran as deep as the cosmos, told me that everything in life happened for a purpose. She said all things were part of God's plan, even the most disheartening setbacks, and in the end, everything worked out for the best. If something went wrong, she said, you don't let it get you down. You stepped away from it. You stepped over it, and you moved on. And later on, she added, something good will happen, and you'll find yourself thinking, if I hadn't had that problem back then this better thing that did happen wouldn't have happened to me. And he was writing about this after he talked about he didn't get a job at Montgomery Ward, which was a department store. And he had to go and search for other work. And he said, although I didn't know it then, I was beginning a journey that would take me a long way from Dixon and fulfill all my dreams and then some. My mother, as usual, was right. So go ahead and think about and write down the name. And maybe if you even want to jot a note, why is this person the foundation for you? And while you're talking about that, I'm going to talk about my own. This is personal work. We saw Rebecca talk about her personal story. For me, my foundation comes from my grandmother. When I was in 7th grade, how many of you 7th grade? Any 7th graders? Anybody been through 7th grade? Excellent, a lot of us, right? So 7th grade was tough for me. I came into middle school, and it was a tough transition, and I failed half of my classes. And that summer, my grandmother, she had a house up in Montana, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, a long way from the nearest town. And every single day, she pulled me in, and we sat down at lunch, and we sat down at breakfast, we sat down at dinner, and she gave me a lecture on what it meant to do my best. And she looked at my grades, and she said, "These grades are lies. This is not you. You're better than this. And when you get a grade like this, you are lying to yourself, and you are lying to the people around you, and I expect better of you." And at the end, can you imagine that every single day? Oh my gosh, and my grandma was tough and still is tough. And so at the end of that summer, I said, "Listen, Grandma, I'm going to get on the honor roll just so you're not going to talk to me about this anymore." And I went on and did much, much better in school. I expected better for myself. So hopefully you have that written down. I still hear her voice from that summer every time I have something tough going on. Okay, so we got our foundation, right? The second person I want you to think about for you is the light. The light is someone who inspires us, right? So who causes us to do our best, who constantly elevates us to strive to do better. For President Reagan, this was his beloved Nancy, Mrs. Reagan, who earlier this year passed away and was buried right next to him. Together forever. If you get a chance today, you should stop by the gravesite and pay your respects. In a letter to Nancy on their 31st wedding anniversary, he wrote, "I more than love you. I'm not whole without you. You are life itself to me. When you are gone, I'm waiting for you to return so I can start living again." Isn't that beautiful? It's amazing, right? How many of you ever gotten a love note like that? A couple of you. Look at that. All right, I like it. There's some great gentlemen out there. So I want you to think about, and write down a person or a woman or people who bring light to you. It might be people who inspire you. It might be people who you want to inspire. But I want you to write that name, and I want you to think about that today. For me, this is my children, and for the purposes of today, my daughters. And that's the reason I love my work here too. Every day I want to go home and I want to hug my kids and I want to look at them. There was a poll that really bothered me before the election about people who look at our country and said, "You know what? This country is going to be worse off for my children than it was for me." And for me, the work we do here is just saying, that's not acceptable, right? How can you look at your child in the eye and say, "I'm working on a world that's not as good for you"? And so for me, it's my children. That's the light. I want to do good work for them. And if they deserve it, so does every child in every city, in every town, and everybody in this room. And if we don't believe we have this country, and if we don't believe that we are building a more perfect union, a land with liberty and justice, we said the Pledge of Allegiance early, a land of liberty and justice for all, then how can we sit around and just kind of hope that someone else is going to fix it for us, right? We can't. So every time I hug my children or see them smile or listen to the dreams they have for themselves, I know that this light is going to keep on burning. So to wrap up today, as we celebrate the 35th anniversary of the O'Connor appointment to the Supreme Court, and President Reagan said when she was confirmed, "Let me also say that Judge O'Connor's confirmation symbolizes the richness of opportunity that still abides in America. Opportunity that permits persons of any sex or age or race from every section and every walk of life to aspire and achieve in a manner never before even dreamed about in human history." So a moment ago I mentioned liberty and justice, right? How many of you have said those words over and over again every time you say the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Liberty and justice, two of the most important American ideals. For the purposes of today, it's interesting that these two quintessential American ideals are always represented in the form of a female, right? This is a statue outside of the Supreme Court. We've talked about justice. This is called the Contemplation of Justice. And any of you who've ever been in trouble before with your mom know this exact look as your mom contemplates justice for you, right? And you might have seen this. This is kind of the typical depiction of justice, the woman with the scales of justice. Well, another lady that was very important to President Reagan is Lady Liberty, right? Since 1886, the Statue of Liberty has stood with her light held high in New York Harbor, welcoming people from all shores, right? President Reagan sometimes talked about a shining city on the hill. And so here's what I want to do. Rebecca had you do your power pose. We're going to do some liberty pose here. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think, first of all, about the foundation. So I want you to stand up. Stand up, because the foundation is what gives you strength, right? Your foundation is what gives you strength. It's your moral core, it's your ethical core, it's your character. And so I want you to feel the strength that you have, the foundation. So first I want you to feel it in your legs. Everybody feel the strength in their legs? Just kind of focus on your legs and feel the strength that you have there, the strength that you get when you stand up for something that's important to you. Does everybody feel that? How many of you feel like sometimes it's tough to stand for a long time? Right? The Statue of Liberty's been standing since 1886. She hasn't even moved, so don't complain. Right? So you got the strength in your legs. Okay, now I want you to feel the strength you have in your arms. The strength you have in your arms, right? When there's work to do and you use your arms to get that work done, that strength is there for each and every one of you. I want you to stand up straight and feel the strength you have in your backbone, because being a leader is tough, and sometimes you have to stand up and you have to make tough decisions, but you have that strength in your backbone. You can feel, look how straight she's standing, right? I mean, holding her arm up for a minute is tough. She's been doing it since 1886. And the strength you have in here, right? The strength of mental toughness. When things get tough, when times get dark, that's when it's toughest to be a leader. And you have that too, right? And then the strength you have inside of you. These are all the different strengths. This is why your foundation is so important. So you got the foundation down. And now the light. You got to hold it up. See everybody holding up your light. There we go. Look at this. A room full of statues of liberty. All right, this is, I think, Ronald Reagan's dream is to see this room full of statues of liberty, right? Because the light, because sometimes when you're leading or sometimes when you're working on something, you believe in it with all your heart, it's tough because darkness happens. You hear the word no. Things you really, really want don't happen. But you got to hold up that light, right? You got to be strong and you got to hold up that light. And sometimes you don't have that light within you. It feels like it's gone out. So you have to look to the light that you wrote down to give you that light, to lead you out of that darkness. So sometimes you need that light. And sometimes you're going to have to be that light for other people, right? So here's what I want you to do. Make a pledge to yourself and the other women in this room today that some days you're going to need that light and they're going to be there for you, and it might be others. And some days you're going to be that light. So I want you to go around, I want you to hold out your torches, and I want you to light each other's torches. Just kind of reach around, say hi to somebody, light somebody else's torch, be that light for each other. There you go. I love it. I love it. Sandra Day O'Connor said that one of the things that she really loved is find work worth doing and work hard at it. So that's what I want you to do today. I want you to find work that is worth doing, that's worth your time, your investment, your energy, and your strength, and work hard at it. Because today we are going to work hard on worth work doing. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
That's a good one. So do you see why I wanted him to speak today? Yeah, he makes us cry on the regular. He's our Tony Robbins in-house all the time. So at this moment, we're going to take a pause. Because today is about you, and it is about community, and the community of women that have come here today to gather, to share, to inspire. And so we want you to know the people at your table. And you may already know them, but there also might be some stranger faces. So what we would like you to do is we're going to give you a brief moment for you to introduce yourselves. And in the mindfulness of time, because Tony and I talk way too long, we're going to keep this short. So summit leaders, we're going to do the first one. In a minute, your summit leaders are going to lead you in an activity and ask you to introduce yourself to the table. Who are you? What story are you bringing? And why are you here today? And there's a little fun, tricky thing that they're going to explain. Additionally, I just kind of want to talk about a few things that you have on your table. In addition to the fun little games that we're going to play in a moment, you also have a jar. Within that jar, there are buttons. I see some of you are already wearing them. Thank you. For those are your buttons. There's a button that says #GirlsWhoLead, and then there's another button that is an identifier. You may not identify with that one at your table, and if you don't, I encourage you to go around and introduce yourself during breaks, during lunch, to somebody else. How many of you have ever been to Disneyland and seen the pin exchange? That's what we're bringing here today, ladies, okay? Exchange your pins. Maybe you have an entrepreneur, but you see yourself more as an advocate. Find an advocate, have a conversation, switch pins, okay? So that way, by the end of the day, every single one of those glass containers are empty because every single person here is representing themselves and how they identify as a leader. So, summit leaders, we're gonna take roughly about 7 minutes to get this going, and then we're gonna move into our second session. Enjoy.